All right, so I'm your presenter today. My name's Sandi Moore. I'm a principal security consultant here with Help Systems. My role is to share with customers information about our security products. I do security education. I've worked on IBMI for quite some time now. I've worked in support, training, testing, but really most of my enjoyment comes from being able to share information with people and show all the cool things that you can do on IBMI and how we can help with that. So I encourage questions as we go through. We'll answer them at the end if we've got time. Really want to make sure that we get you guys on with your day. So let's talk about security. So when we're looking at security, when we talk IBMI, the IBMI itself has a reputation as one of the most secure operating systems on the market. I have people tell me all the time, well, we're not worried about it. It's IBMI. What are we concerned about? And, it's a valid comment because IBM themselves has told users that it is considered one of the most secure systems in the industry. What unfortunately happens is that we ignore it and it's kind of invisible in that server room and we don't get a lot of attention for it to actually implement security controls. Now, what I want you to think about is that secure implies that you simply plug it in and you don't have to actually configure anything. No work is required. That, hey, plug it in, it's good to go. We don't have to take any action. But really the way we like to think about it is that the IBMI itself is not so much secure, but it's more of a securable platform. There are steps and measures that should be taken in order to take advantage of those security controls that IBM provides. And when we talk about how we see the system and why we think people aren't actually taking advantage of these security controls, because we do an annual State of IBMI security study and we compile statistics from security information off of user systems. So it's not our opinion, we're looking at what customer systems actually look like. And the study, which is available online, and we'll be coming out with our 2021 study here, hopefully first quarter of the year, and be able to see what are systems looking like. And you can compare year to year to see what's happening. And while we do see that there is improvement and there is attention being paid to it, there's always room for more improvement. And so that's kind of where we're at. So with that said, actually what I want to do is take a quick poll, see where everybody's at here, to see if you've got security initiatives going on this year in your company. So kind of just trying to figure out, is there a security initiative? Why did you join me today? Or do you have a security project going on that's got management support? Are you still trying to gain management support for that project? You'd really like to do it. Maybe you don't have anything going on yet, but you're thinking about it. Maybe if you have enough compelling information that it might drive you to do something. Or if you are confident that your IBMI is already secure, kudos for joining and just sitting in and listening. I appreciate that. So kind of gives us some ideas on where everybody's at. This might be something that's gone on for years and you're still fighting the good fight to get that security project on the table and on the budget, but you have to start somewhere. So all right, let me go ahead and I'm going to close up that poll in just a second here. Looks like most of you have voted on it. And surprisingly, this is unusual, is that there's actually a lot of support from management for security projects this year. So we've got 57% reporting they've got support for this. Some of you still need a little bit of help with it. 24%, not quite sure, but you might consider looking into something. And we've got a couple here that actually are feeling pretty secure with their system. So, all right. Well, that gives me some good ideas here. So hopefully we'll be able to carry on and give you some things that'll get you some leverage and get you going on this. So with security itself, it's definitely something that takes some work. It is a project. It is going to need some effort involved. And it's not going to be an overnight thing. The system didn't become unsecure or didn't undo its security overnight on its own. And so it's going to take some effort. There's no silver bullet. And you've got commercial tools that can assist you with that project. However, you need to be careful. There's no such thing as set it and forget it, and there is no magic potion that's going to say, ta-da, now our system's secure. There's a lot of steps that you can take that you can start working on without having to do a major overhaul, major investment, things that you can start questioning and going through. So, number one on that list of quick wins that will help you out is system auditing. So that system auditing is something that is going to be important if you have a problem on your system. So think about, why would you bother auditing? I want you to think of the auditing as a flight recorder. So your system is that airplane, and you hope it never goes down, never crashes, and nothing ever happens to it. But if it does, you need to have some information to go look back at and figure out what happened. Why did things go wrong? That audit log is going to give you that information. That's your black box recorder for IBM, where you can go back and figure out what happened on my system. And then you can go back and figure out how do you prevent it in the future. When we look at customer systems using the audit journal, we find that there's actually almost 80% of customers actually use that audit journal to collect information on their systems. However, what we're finding is that a significant portion of the 80% of users are not actually collecting the correct information. They're not keeping the data long enough for it to be useful. They have no archiving or retention policy. So the data is not kept for any period of time. The audit data is not proactively reviewed. They don't have any tools to help them dig through what can be an overwhelming amount of information to pick out the information that's important. Another thing we find is that high availability software configures the auditing for its own needs, and the organization doesn't even know about it. So HA is using that information on deleted and created objects, and then it's never used. And the things that are important, like system value changes and authority failures, are never collected because you don't have to replicate that stuff. But it's important to the company as a whole for the security perspective. So the security audit journal has to be called QAudJourn, and it has to reside in the QSysLib. And you can create the components and set the system value controls manually, but you can also use a system value, the change security aud command, to pull all of those components together. So getting started with it is not too hard. The QAud control system value is going to be your on-off switch. So once you've created that QAudJourn, then you can turn on the auditing itself. So specifying *none turns everything off completely. If you specify aud level, you can turn on the system level event auditing. So things like the authority failures and those system value changes, for example. Specify the object auditing to turn on that object level auditing. So what objects on the system have been modified, sensitive objects, so focusing on those and being able to narrow in on the objects themselves. Another thing you can do to customize to make sure that you aren't flooded with information is the no QTemp, which will tell the system to ignore activities out of a job's QTemp library, so the temporary library, because there's going to be a lot of things being deleted and added through those. So first, control. So now when we get down to the auditing values with the QAud level system value, we can start determining what's going to be audited. And so these are going to focus on the system level activities. And there's actually one that is a default set, and it's going to basically add the authority failures, the create, the delete, the security, and the save restore audit values to QAud level. QAud level has an overflow companion called QAud level 2 that IBM added because they had so many potential audit values that you could set that they actually needed a longer list. So with that, you have to be careful with it, because with aud level, you can add only a certain number of values, and then it can overflow into that aud level too. But what we've seen is that sometimes you see aud level, the QAud level value, and you look at that and you see all the things that are in there, and you forget to go look at QAud level 2, or you only look at QAud level 2 and you don't look at QAud level. So there's a disconnect. So rather than using the overflow, what you can do is set QAud level to only look at odd level 2, and then put everything you want to audit in that QAud level 2. So simplifies it. There's only one place to look to make sure that you're actually auditing the right things. The other piece of the auditing is the journal receiver. So this is the thing that actually holds the data. The QAud journ is the umbrella, and then what's underneath it are the little buckets that actually contain the data that's being collected. And so each of those are going to have a sequence number, and the name of it, each subsequent receiver will be named similarly. So if it's QR odd receiver 00001, the next one's going to be Q odd receiver 0002, and so forth. So it will keep adding on subsequent numbers with that initial naming convention. And if auditing is active, that parameter actually gets ignored. So it'll already use what's there, and then each one will be created in that same place. So that piece is that last area where you have to make sure that you have those buckets that are going to collect that audit data. Now, collecting all that information can be overwhelming, as I had mentioned at the beginning. There's a lot of information out there, and using it proactively is going to be your challenge. How do you find the information so that you know you need to act upon it? The authority failures, great. We had 5 invalid sign-in attempts. Okay, well now the user profile's been disabled, but yet that user still trying to sign on to the system. Are you going to see those authority failures for those disabled profiles in that audit log? So tool you can use that Help Systems has is called our Compliance Monitor. It's browser-based technology, so you can report centrally across one or as many IBMI servers and partitions as you need, so you can collect all the information into one place. You can build scorecards that can help you with exception reporting, keep track of the system settings to make sure that they're really where you intended them to be, that nobody has gone and changed things. You've got a Boolean-based data filtering engine, and we can generate reports, industry standard formats, and distribute them through email. So not only can you get the data pulled, collected into a report, but you can have it in your inbox and from multiple systems. So really gives you the ability to pull everything together, get that data off the system and in front of the right people so that you can react to it in a timely manner. If you have compliance requirements and you have reports that have to be generated over and over on a periodic basis, you can save those reports and run them as needed whenever that audit's coming. So pulling everything together makes it a whole lot easier. All right, so quick win number 2. How are we going to knock this one down? Antivirus. So everybody rolls their eyes, not everybody, but some folks roll their eyes at me when we start talking about antivirus and IBMI. There's always one heckler in the crowd who says, really, do we have to do this? I will tell you that antivirus is an essential piece, and it's low-hanging fruit for tackling what is probably the most predominant security issue for most companies, not specific IBMI, but in general, malware is a big problem. So reason we get eye rolls is that the IBMI has always been thought to be immune to the virus threat, but it can actually play a part as a source of the virus problem on the network. That virus activity, that malware can be propagated throughout map drives, FTP, image catalogs, backup tapes, and even high availability. I'll tell you right now, if you have an HA system, your production system, you've got a map drive and a user gets a virus and it plants itself on the IFS, your high availability software is going to replicate it. It has no problems doing that. So this malware can be propagated across systems and across the network pretty easily. So when malware and ransomware is active on IBMI, it can potentially impact any other device that's connected to it. Those devices that are connected can also impact the IBMI. And PCs, for example, aren't going to see malware resident on IFS because it's not in the local memory of that server or that PC. So the problem is that each one is supposed to be doing its own scanning and making sure that it's not hosting malware, but we're very often missing that IBMI piece that's actually looking for malware on IBMI. So when it's deployed elsewhere, malware can get to your power system server. Even with the best defenses and the most layers, and everything needs to be about layers, this can still spread. We've seen, I actually worked with somebody not too long ago, it was just before Christmas, that they had actually a PC that ended up with an auto-run worm that went through and used the map drives and went through and hid all of their directories and left a copy of itself out there to be further replicated. And they had antivirus on the PC. The PC should have detected it because it was malware from 3 years ago. But it had managed to disable the malware on the PC, and it did in fact end up impacting their IBMI in the IFS. So failed signature updates, deactivated or blocked virus engines, and zero-day exploits can in fact get around your layers of defense and end up reaching the power systems. So when we talk about a traditional virus, it's not, or traditional by Windows-based virus, it's not going to infect a native object. It's not going to impact an RPG program, physical file, or query definition. But unfortunately, what was interpreted from that is that there's not possible for a virus to be on IBMI. But it was never said that it was immune. It said that the native programs were not as readily impacted. So what actually happened is IBM added integrated antivirus controls back at V5R3. They said, you know what, we recognize that we do have a problem. And so we need to create the infrastructure to actually allow for those controls. The fact that they actually bothered adding that, and I don't know if you've ever asked IBM to change anything, but it's not easy to do. And so the fact that they thought it was serious enough and a big enough problem that they added the controls there. One thing they didn't do is that they didn't actually create a scan engine. So they added system values and exit points and attributes on all your stream files to support that virus scanning. They just didn't actually create the scan engine itself. IBM's not an antivirus company, so this was not something that they were going to tackle. When we talk about the IFS, if people say, you know what, the IFS, it's only the IFS. We're not concerned about that. We only care about our native library structures. Well, you can't, not necessarily you're going to have an infected or encrypted native object in qsys.lib, but it can still negatively impact that native structure. So files can be deleted, they can be renamed. Think about ransomware. If you've got a map drive to the root directory and you look underneath there, you'll see qsys.lib. It's just another directory, but it is your operating system. And if there is something going through maliciously attacking everything in that root directory that's mapped, when it gets this qsys.lib, if that user has authority to delete that object, it's going to get deleted. And it can, in fact, bring the system down. We've seen it happen. There's actually been some recent examples of someone who ran a simulation to show what it would look like if your native structure was attacked through a map drive, and it in fact was able to delete the entire OS. When we look for proof of it, here's a screenshot from a customer that I personally worked with that had in fact an infected system. They had a map drive to the root directory, and that user had all object authority, and they ended up with 500,000 files encrypted on their system. 248,000 copies of that ransomware was found out there. So it does happen. It can actually spread very quickly, and especially if you've got users with too much access. When we look at native antivirus, it actually provides a lot of benefits, and the full integration between IBMI and the scan engine and the antivirus engine. You've got utilization of the stream file property. So those scan attributes, has the file been scanned? Was it cleaned? Should it be scanned on change only, yes or no? What was the last version of the DAT files, the virus definitions that was used to scan it? Make sure you're current. Performance improvements through selective scanning. So if the file's already been scanned, do we have to scan it again? Yes or no? looking at infected files. There's a scan attribute of star failure. If that file is infected, it can't be used. We shouldn't be able to use it. Real-time incremental scanning allows you with on-access scanning to actually look at files as they're being opened through the file server. So that biggest problem of the cross-platform contamination, those map drives, so being able to scan it as users open and close them, and then through the job scheduler. So native scanning really allows you to fully integrate with the system, make it as efficient as possible. Now, Powertech Antivirus is a tool that is the only commercially grade antivirus that runs natively on IBM, AIX, and Linux, even Lotus Domino on Power. So with that product, you're able to scan the system safely, securely, and effectively, backed by the McAfee scan engine, built with a partnership with McAfee and Help Systems. So, it brings that full spectrum to the full protection of antivirus on the system. When you purchase and install an antivirus engine, you turn on the real-time scanning and scheduled scans. You're able to integrate with supplied exit points, configure your system values properly so that you are in fact getting that full impact and scanning of the files, and job schedule entries for the scan engine updates and virus definitions, review your logs, and you're done. So easy to knock down number 2 there, getting that implemented and making sure that that IFS is not in fact part of the problem. All right, quick win number 3, command permissions. So we've talked to a lot of customers, as I mentioned before, and we see a lot of systems. And one of the things that we come across is that there's a lot of users who have the ability to run commands on IBM, and we don't even realize it. So when we talk about users being able to run commands, we have to consider a couple things. They have to have visibility to a command line, and they have non-limited capabilities, or they can use a command function through a network surface, such as FTP or remote command execution. So with those, you can run a command. Of course, a lot of times the command line is invisible. Users get a menu, and they're restricted only to the options here on the screen. So that makes it easier, right? So unfortunately, what we see a lot is that this is depend upon. So we hope that, they don't know that behind the scenes, they may have the ability to actually run a command because their initial menu that they get doesn't give them that command line. But if a user has non-limited capabilities, there's a potential they can get here. And once they're at this screen, they're going to have the ability to run a command if they've got permission to it. So the idea here is that we need to make sure that we've checked a couple of extra boxes so that the command permissions are not allowed and that the users are not going to be able to do that. One thing to look at is the limited capability setting. Do a change user profile and look at the limit capability setting. If that user does not need to have a command line option, they don't need to be running commands, they should be set to limit capability yes. We don't want to give them the potential. I've actually seen users with limit capability no, with a menu with no command line on it, and yet they've been able to force errors through the application they were working in until they ended up at a command line. And then that user was able to run commands. So while it was invisible to them on initial review, they in fact had that permission. Now, when we look at the command itself, you have to consider as well, has that command been allowed for limited capability users? You can easily allow a user to run specific commands that you want them to be able to run, but by default, the allow limited users is going to be set to no. So if they are not able to run that command, they have limit capability set to yes, they're not going to be able to run that specific command. So that can help to knock down their ability to run specific commands or get them to limit capability yes and allow them only the commands that you want. Pretty short list in most cases. The other challenge is that with those commands is there's going to be object authority on it. What is the public authority to the object? So your default authority. This case shows the end subsystem command has public use. Okay, so that could be a potential problem. User's going to be able to run the end subsystem command. That could be a problem. I've seen it happen. Users running, ending a subsystem instead of a job and creating some pretty significant downtime. There is another catch. Some of these commands do in fact require some of the special authorities in order to run them. So end subsystem, for example, you have to have job control special authority to run it. So there's some caveats there where we can actually pull back the permissions and make sure that the users can't run them through a number of things. Making sure that check for command line visibility if they're set to non-limited capabilities, or if it's a command that's allowed to be used. Authority of the command object itself, and then if those users meet any special authority requirements. So meeting those 4 options, well, almost 5, they would in fact be able to run those commands. So good things to go back and double check when you're restricting the ability to run those commands on a green screen. Network services is a whole other issue. Users with and without limited capabilities can in fact run commands against IBMI. So if they've got access to use FTP, for example, you got limited capability set to yes, you could in fact run commands through that FTP server, push back to the system. So definitely would be problematic. So network services, unfortunately, there's a lot less requirements for someone to be able to run a command. Command line visibility doesn't matter. Limited capabilities settings doesn't matter. They still have to have authority to the command object, and they still have to meet those special authority requirements. So got to watch out for that one. And, really keeping in mind that some of those services, network services, don't observe the limit capability settings. They need to be controlled through exit programs. So be cautious with those. All right, quick win number 4, administrative privileges. So I already mentioned one of them, that job control to be able to run the end subsystem command. You need that. So those administrative privileges are going to be assigned to users directly or indirectly through group profiles. When we look at our user profiles, we have to consider, where do they come from? How long have they been on the system? This is the one in the top there, the biggest one is jokingly been called QAtom. So the beginning of profiles, and then it's copied, and then they're copied again and again and again. So as profiles are copied, unfortunately, not everybody does an F10 or an F9, pages down and checks to see if there's extra permissions on this profile. We just copy them because it's the closest match. So it can definitely create some scenarios where we've got a lot of users that have inherited permissions on the system just based on the fact that that's how it's always been done. The other problem, of course, is the save and restore. So starting back at your AS400 days and then your iSeries and your power systems, we save and we restore. We don't necessarily go back and review those profiles to see if they still need those privileges. When we look at customer systems with our security scans and part of our State of IBMI security study, pulling all that data together, we find that the average special authorities are well above necessary. And these authorities are assigned to end users, not just administrators. And that's really the mindset that we're trying to get to, is that if you're not an administrator, you shouldn't have administrative rights to the system. And that's the idea here. We want to protect the system. And this is not just a one-off. There's not just one customer that throws this number off every year. We've got here a couple of screenshots from different customer systems showing, in fact, that these user profiles over and over again have a lot of administrative rights, a lot of the special authorities that they don't necessarily need. It's hard to justify having 125 user profiles with all object when you've got 2 administrators. So this is a real world problem, and we definitely need to start evaluating and identifying who has these privileges. You can run the print user profile report to see which profiles have each of those authorities. And don't forget to check the group profiles. So if you see a group profile in that list, go back and see who's a member of that group profile, so you can identify everybody who's has the ability to take advantage of it. Limit how those privileges can actually be leveraged. So going back to command lines, don't give them a command line on an application screen so that they can't leverage that job control or that all object. Limit capabilities on the user's profile. Audit the users that do have those privileges. If you have your administrators identified and you need to leave them with those special authorities, make sure you're auditing what they're doing so that if there is a problem, you've got information to go back to and determine how it happened. Use exit programs to add that additional layer of control to make sure that they're not using commands through the PC interfaces, taking advantage of those special authorities. One way to get around assigning those special authorities is to take those restricted functions to CL programs and run those CL programs with adopted authority instead. So a lot of ways that we can still clean it up, get it pulled back so that somebody can't take advantage of it. When we get down to users that we absolutely can't take it away from, we need to give them those authorities, but we want to make sure we know what they're doing and we can put some controls around it, is using a tool called Powertech Authority Broker. And it allows you to monitor and control the use of those powerful authorities. It lets you specify when and how a user can gain or elevate their authority. It works within the IBM security to protect your assets. It provides notification, monitoring, and control of those users. So not only are you going to be able to still let that user elevate their authority, but you're going to see what they did while they were elevated. Did they go into SQL and update information? Did they go into DFU and update or add records or remove records? Screen for screen, you can actually capture what that user's doing. Think about having vendors or third-party people on your system. Do you allow people to sign on to your system that are not employed by you? How are you going to make sure that they're doing what they say they're going to be doing? So this is one way that you can have that visibility to what people are doing, regardless of how they're doing it. All right, quick win number 5. This one's a good one. Exit points. All right, so when we're talking about exit points, what we have to do is start thinking about really the structure of IBM. It has the integrated database called DB2. So when you get a user ID and a password, those credentials are going to give you access to the database through every interface supported by the user or supported by the server. So the user's been given access. Here's the database structure. Here's your credentials. Have at it. IBM doesn't really say, well, how are you connecting? Oh, wait a minute, this is probably not the way that the administrator meant for you to connect to the system and get into the database. Back to the dumb terminal and the green screen only, this was easy. You gave the user what you wanted to have access to, and it didn't really matter. And that menu security allowed you to limit the application options that a user can access. And the application security itself restricted the functions within the application that the user could access. So really made it pretty easy. We could say, all right, this is your menu, and in the application, this is what you can do. These approaches tend to be still relied upon. We have, I'd say probably the majority of customers I talk to still have the bulk of their users using green screen, and that these menu and application controls are what is governing what the user can access. Unfortunately, the approaches do mask the complexity of that object level security. When you get into the object level security, it's a bit of a rat's nest as to library authorities, object level authorities, private authorities versus the public authorities. And then all object, it's game on. So unfortunately, the menu and application security controls are not sufficiently comprehensive because IBM really made the system much more available through the network interfaces. So with the Telnet application menu, they land on the green screen. That's all they're going to do. That's all the places they get to go. But when you add in the services that IBM provides to connect to the system outside of that green screen interface, the FTP, DDM, ODBC, JDBC, it bypasses that menu security. It bypasses those application controls, and it relies upon only the object level authorities. So is that user authorized to that database file? Well, yeah. So we lose those controls and those restrictions. So what IBM allows you to do is actually take those exit points and add functions to them. Called with an exit program, you can register an exit program that will be called by the operating system when a transaction receives. So if a user connects to the system through FTP, for example, an exit program can be called to do something. The operating system says, all right, well, exit program, tell me what I should do. Should I let this user complete this transaction? Yes or no? So it actually adds that layer where actually we have a stop sign where we've actually stopped the user and we're checking their credentials. Should we really actually allow them onto the system through this doorway? So there's actually 25 exit points that are dedicated to those users accessing the server and the data through those PC interfaces. That's a lot of entry points to the system. A lot of those we actually don't pay a lot of attention to. So really being able to interrogate the user when they connect and make sure that we really want them to connect through it is a critical piece of securing the data on the system. So with the exit programs, they can actually do anything, even something malicious, which we would hope that no one's doing that, but it's a potential because those exit programs are written by a programmer. So when we're talking about PC access, security officers should typically be involved and should have some basic functions that they're expecting with those exit programs. First thing an exit program should do is audit, to actually audit the activity through that entry point to the system, because IBM doesn't really do that on its own. It's not watching what you're doing. It says, oh, you have credentials. Okay, here you go. You can come onto the system. And the other piece that we really want to make sure that's happening is control, because that object level security is often weak or lacking, or the user has too much authority. They've got all object authority. So we want to make sure we're controlling what users are getting to through those PC accesses. Exit program can return a pass-fail indicator to the exit point, which can either halt or allow the transaction to continue. Now, an exit point or an exit program is not going to actually give a user more authority if they don't have authority of the object itself. So the object OS level rules still are going to prevail, not going to give someone more, but it can actually add another layer and pull back the authorities a user may have. All right, so those exit programs, of course, are going to be able to allow you to compensate for poorly configured security controls and reduce the risk associated with those. And those exit programs are going to prevent unwanted access to your data and commands. It'll still allow the approved access. So the users that are supposed to use the ODBC connection and build a spreadsheet over that data they have authority to would be allowed to continue. But someone else who should not be using ODBC to pull that spreadsheet off to their PC is going to be blocked from it. So that exit program should also allow you to log and alert those attempts. So not only whether you allow it or not, you still need to know somebody's trying. Without an exit program, you're not going to see that activity. When we look at customer systems through our security scans results and the State of IBMI Security Study, we're finding that only about 31% of the systems that we evaluate actually have exit programs in place. And only about 8% of those actually have comprehensive exit program coverage. So sometimes it's organizations are unaware that there's the capability for it. Sometimes they've chosen not to use it because they've got a firewall that is protecting the company itself. So really taking that next step is a critical piece of gaining control over IBMI. So exit programs, you can write your own. It is possible to do that. IBM provides some samples on their website. You can also search for published examples. And it can be very complex, however. And so, you don't want to disrupt production, and you don't want to disrupt approved traffic on the system. So you have to be very careful with it. So if you're doing anything other than simply blocking all traffic, it gets very complicated very quickly. It can also cause performance issues, especially when we're working with ODBC. So you have to be very careful with that, always testing against each OS level release. And then if you in fact are audited, auditors very often take exception to policing yourselves. And so what is that program actually doing? The internal programmer wrote it, and oh wait, he gave himself a backdoor to do this. Well, that's not okay. So the other option is to purchase a commercial solution. Our Powertech Exit Point Manager allows you to drop in those exit point programs to all of the exit points, start auditing the traffic, build rules to allow access. Now, going back to a comment I made earlier about having visibility to attempts to get on the system, I have to tell you a story about a customer that we worked with recently who had actually deployed our exit point manager during a proof of concept, and about halfway through it, they came up with an issue, and they asked one of my colleagues to jump on a meeting with them to review what they were seeing. And what they were seeing was they had almost 900 invalid FTP sign-on attempts overnight. Now, these attempts were from an external foreign country IP address, and all of those attempts were from user profiles that are not standard IBMI profiles. Root, admin, administrator, anonymous, user, user123, things that you'd see more on an attack against a Windows server or Unix-based server. So what that told these companies was that not only is their IBMI not invisible, it's visible to the outside world. Without having exit programs in place, they would never have seen those attempted accesses to their system because IBMI doesn't log that activity. If you don't get in, you're not seeing that action. So having those in place is going to give you that visibility to actually be able to see what's happening. So a critical piece of this. Now, if we're talking about hacking the system, someone who is a malicious actor, someone who's trying to do something destructive to your system, they're not going to break through a green screen. They're not going to try to break your menus in most cases. It's going to be a crime of opportunity where they have found a server that's visible and they're watching traffic and they see that everybody's pointing to this server, or it's simply a matter of having had that map drive out there. So really, all of these external access points to the system is where you need to be watching for that activity, not focused on that green screen menu. So big piece of getting that server secured. All right, so this is from a quote from Dennis Hoffman with RSA. And he says, the day before a breach, the return on your investment is 0. The day after, it's infinite. So, after there's a problem, wow, that really was worth the money. And so we don't want to wait until it's the day after. And making sure that we're tackling some of this before it becomes a problem is infinitely important. All right, so call to action for you guys today. What I want you to start thinking about is actually looking at and facing where your system is at with security. You can assess the risk of a breach with our security scan. I've kind of dropped that out there, references to it throughout the presentation today, and it's the data that builds our State of IBMI Security Study every year. It is a risk-free exam. It is free, so you don't have to pay for it, no cost, which everybody's like, what, really? Yeah, so it is free. It evaluates 6 different areas of security on your system. It runs very quickly. It's non-intrusive. It doesn't access application data. It doesn't make modifications to any settings on your system. And you can run it for free for 7 days. So you can actually run it. If you see something that's horrifying, you can go back, make a change, and rerun it. So it lets you have some good visibility and can help you get traction if you don't have support from management yet to actually start on a security project. This might help you get some attention for it because it actually breaks it down into full Technicolor so you can actually see what your system looks like. Not just, hey, look at this webinar, Sandi says it's really bad. This is actually going to go through and evaluate your system. So there's no denying what you end up seeing here. So really encourage customers to do this. You have to start somewhere. This is a good place to start. Gives you some ideas, low-hanging fruit that you can tackle yourselves, those 5 quick wins we've just talked about, things that can be done to get good, effective security in place so you've got the layers to protect the server itself. All right, let's see here. I'm going to launch one more poll. So actually wondering if anybody's interested in the security scan. So, you know, we talk about this a lot and the ability to get that quick look at your system, evaluate the security, kind of gives us an idea. If you're ready to look at it, maybe you've already done this with me. If you have, you probably heard that I have a nickname called Hurricane Sandy because we do include a review of the security scan. So not only do you run it, get your information on it, but you can get an hour of my time or one of my colleagues' time, and we'll go through and talk about what it found and talk about the things that you can do to get things moving quickly, low-hanging fruit and suggestions, things that we have to offer. So definitely a cool tool to be able to get that started. All right, so looks like some of you guys are interested in that. Maybe if you have more information, we'll be happy to get with you guys, give you a sample of it so you can actually see what it does. Can certainly go through with you and let you know what all of the, how the process works. So, all right, I'm gonna go ahead and close that poll now. Thank you for responding. Looks like we've got some folks that have already actually done that. And so as I said before, there's some familiar faces on here today. All right, so we've got a ton of resources as well on our website. There's videos, you can do a trial download off the website, product information data sheets, guides, technical articles, customer success stories, how-tos. Of course, you can request the security scan there as well. We've got a lot of recorded webinars as well. So, you know, we do like to contribute to the IBMI community through education, and not just on our software, but on IBMI itself and making sure that the investment's there. So certainly some information available out there for you guys. All right, so looks like we've got a couple minutes for questions here. If your question's too in-depth, I'm probably gonna follow back up with you guys later, but let's see here. And if you guys did have any other questions, feel free to shoot those over. So let's see, methods available to secure SQL, delete and update. So you're going to, through exit programs, you can actually restrict the functions that the user can run through ODBC and SQL. So that is one way to do that. Making sure that the user is not authorized to delete or update the database itself. There's another question here on best way to secure access through ACS. So for the end users, you probably want to make sure you're restricting the data transfer from and to IBMI functions, the IFS restrictions as well. So not allowing the user, if they do in fact have options for green screen, to not allow those additional services. And I think on default, you can set a default on that. All right, let's see here. Question about QAuth level. How does QAuth level work where QAuth level 2 is included? Does it ignore all QAuth level and only respect QAuth level 2? No, it'll use all of them. So everything that's specified on QAuth level and QAuth level 2 will be enforced. It just can be confusing because you have to look at 2 places to see the sum total of everything that's actually being audited. So it doesn't ignore anything. It just makes it a little bit harder to confirm what you're actually auditing. All right, let's see, a question here about recommending the risk assessment before install configure exit point manager. You could do it either way. Actually, the security scan is going to detect that you have exit points, and so it will show that you're good because you have exit points or exit programs installed. However, I always qualify that in a review that the exit programs are only as effective as their configuration. So having exit programs does not make it secure, it's the configuration itself. So it just really depends on timing if you want to do it before or after. So it'll make you look good if you have it installed already because it'll be a green check mark, but really the configurations has to be done. All right. Let's see here if we've got any more questions. Oh, here's a good one. How long should we keep the audit journal receivers? So this is a matter of debate. You should have minimum of 6 months of audit entries available. So whether they're on backups or still on the system, either way, you want to have access to it. So if you can restore it from that previous backup, that would be sufficient. So minimum 6 months. It does can take quite some time to discover that there was a breach or that there was a problem. So being able to go back. One benefit actually to our compliance monitor is that we can collect that audit data and compress it and store it separately so that you can run reports on older information, even if those journal receivers are detached and deleted already. So you do get some additional functionality that way, so it can help with that. All right. Let's see, we got one more question here I think we'll do before we cut everybody loose. Let's see, I've got a question here. How can I know who is coming to my system database through ODBC database? And the best way to control that, exit programs. So the only way to see that traffic is through having an exit program in place that is auditing that traffic. So, and the best way to control that is with the exit program that you can create rules to allow specific users or group profiles to access ODBC. And then you can start, you can do memorized transactions. So if you have a whole group of users that needs to be able to run a specific query, allow that to continue, but you can reject them from doing anything else. So a couple different ways that can happen. All right, let's see here. Got some folks here, let's see. Okay, last question. Does the audit journal create large files? If so, how would I manage it? So it can. So you have to be selective in what you turn on. I would not go turn on every auditing option possible if you don't have a lot of disk space. Be selective with it. If you do the security scan with us, one of the things we look at is what auditing values you have turned on. And we have a suggested group of audit values to actually activate that are going to focus on the most sensitive security information. So, you don't have to turn everything on, don't have to open the floodgates. Start with those pieces that are going to give you the most value and should not have a lot of activity around them. So authority failures, for example, hopefully you don't have a lot of authority failures on your system. So audit log shouldn't fill up very quickly. So, all right. If I didn't get your question, I will follow back up on those. Looks like we've got some other stuff in here. I want to make sure everybody can get carried on to their day. So I'll follow back up with you if I didn't get to your question. Really appreciate all of your time today. Looks like everybody hung in with me, which is pretty impressive. All right. So look for future webinars from Help Systems. If you do, in fact, need more information, you can visit our website or email us here, info@helpsystems.com. Really appreciate your time and investment in security. Just listening to me as your time investment there is appreciated. So, all right, take care and happy security.